All right, everybody, welcome back. Episode 007, just like James Bond, here of the Southern U podcast. Joined with, as always, with Mr. Jeremy Ferguson of Tutland / Wildlife Consulting / Outfitter / whatever.
Cattle farm.
Cattle farmer / whatever.
Anything else that you can lose money at.
Anything you can lose money at. Yeah, that's true. Of course, we got Matt Brock. Here, the AL Deer legend, Matt Brock. That's right. We got to keep that going.
No, y'all going to have to quit that.
I mean, look, some people are afraid of the truth, you know. That's the truth.
It is. Look, I knew who he was long before I'd ever met him, all because of AL Deer.
There you go.
And he didn't even live in the state of Alabama.
God, see?
He was a Mississippi man at that point.
That's how you know.
That's it.
That's how you know.
I know I want to move on.
Right. Oh, me. No, my name's Taylor McMurtry, and I hang out with these knuckleheads because I am a glutton for punishment, I guess. I don't know.
Gotta be.
Yep. So before we get into the topic of discussion, I wanted to take just a second and kind of talk about a couple things. Number one, thank you guys for listening and sharing and telling your friends about the podcast. It's been overwhelmingly positive here lately. Of course, there's a few negative comments here and there, but
which we love.
Oh yeah. You're not hurting anybody's
I
feelings.
want to address some of that.
Yeah. Well, the more negative y'all can bring, the more fun we're going to have with you.
Yeah. It's not you're not hurting anybody's feelings here. We're having a good time either way. But a couple things in particular that have come up more than once. One, I believe, started on YouTube and maybe a couple times on Instagram, but you guys have asked, hey, look, you call yourself, Southern U. We haven't heard anything about Texas. You don't talk about Texas enough. So I want to take just a second and maybe address that for a minute. The reason you don't hear us reference Texas a lot, or, even though Jeremy and Matt both have experience there, the reason you don't hear us talk about it much is it really kind of is its own planet. Yes, it's in the South. Yes, it's, considered southern deer and, southern habitat, all that kind of stuff. Number one, Texas is huge. That's a humongous state and various terrain types and soil types and all kind of stuff. So, what is true of one part of Texas is not necessarily true of another part of Texas. So it's hard to give generalized statements on that state because of that. And then also, different subspecies of animals there too. You've got, deer and turkey. You've got a lot of different stuff there. So if you may hear us reference something about Texas, but we've kind of intentionally not gone that route just because it kind of is its own world.
It's completely different.
Yeah, it is.
And when everybody talks about Texas, really most of the time they're carving out that southern Texas area and calling that Texas. Well, Texas, like you said, is huge. The eastern portion of Texas is very similar to us. It's piney woods country, so the same principles apply. So it's not that they don't have some similarities to us. Just by and large, the state as a whole is managed much differently. Even East Texas, their management is so far past what a lot of folks are doing because it is still big landowners, and you have a high number of high fences there that's catching on, everywhere now.
Sure.
But
And just because we don't specifically state Texas, that doesn't mean that some of the things that we talk about are not applicable there.
That's right.
That's right.
And look, a lot of the principles that we're talking about here, they weren't necessarily pioneered, but they were quote unquote perfected in Texas. I mean, they are able to manage at a such higher degree because of the land holding size, and another big reason is because the money that's behind it.
Yeah, land ownership and money. If you want to know a lot about deer, you got to have land and you got to have money.
That's right. Yep.
So it's different
For sure.
even though it's the same.
It's different.
Which sounds, it's exactly the same but completely different.
What
if
is
that makes
I
sense.
don't know. I got some feedback
Yeah.
crazy going on. Is that phone sitting up here or something? Maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Did that help?
It seems like it did.
Okay.
I don't know. Sorry, guys. Anyways, but yeah, that's that for Texas. And the other thing was, I've had a couple people go, so you guys must only hunt private land, or you guys must only care about private land. And it's like, well, the podcast is about land management and being able to do that, and it's hard to manage property that you don't own or lease, So, not that what we're saying from from harvest perspectives or something like that can't be applied to some elements, I guess, in the public land game, but for the most part, it's you've got to own the land to be able to do the things you need to do to make it.
There's other podcasts out there with public land
at the forefront
hunters.
That's
That's what they focus on, and that's not what we want to focus on.
No. And public land is vastly different here in the Southeast anyway than it is in a lot of other parts of the country. Still got the feedback.
Don't know what
it is.
I wonder if it's my computer or something. Surely not, but
Is it in a connection somewhere?
shouldn't be.
Troubleshooting in the
Sorry.
middle.
Yeah, in the middle.
We're good.
It's all right. Yeah.
But
we can keep going.
yeah, the land ownership even in the public hunting properties is generally private, and it's leased to the public entities, and those public entities don't have the ability to manage it. The owner still calls the shots. They just get to provide public hunting. So even though there's a lot of management on public ground, in the Southeast, there's a lot of ground that the state agencies or the public agencies aren't the ones calling those shots. So it's very difficult for them too.
Well, and I want to also point out that I don't want people to mistake what we're doing with being a hunting podcast or hunting show. That's not what we're doing. It is a big part of what we're doing currently, because that's just happens to be the season that we came in. But we're not just a hunting podcast.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I've tried to say that, and I think the last couple episodes I've left it out. But yeah, I mean, that needs to be said. We are in the middle of hunting season here in the South, and kind of getting into the rut and all those sort of things. So, I mean, it's just the season we're in. But if you'll stick with us long enough, you're going to see that at the end of hunting season, we're going to sort of switch gears a little bit and start talking about more habitat improvement for a lot of different things. If that's whether that's for timber or that's for ag, or if you're trying to maximize kind of the dollar amount or value amount of a piece of property, even how to buy land. Jeremy's going to kind of provide some stuff on that. So number one, it's not quote unquote just a hunting podcast. I mean, that was all three of us kind of had that same thought when we started. So anyway, so with that being said, I just wanted to kind of tackle a few of those things before we jumped in to the topic of discussion, because I think we woke up today and just chose violence, because we are going to jump into
towards ourselves.
Yeah, toward ourselves. Yeah. Go ahead and stir up the hornet's nest real good to start the new year. So today's topic, we'll be discussing some disease that has been at the forefront of a lot of conversations and a lot of debates, and that's CWD and EHD. So we'll be talking about that, and I don't even want to say this, but I feel like I probably need to. Matt has brought something out to celebrate this special occasion, which I'm not very excited about at all.
Well, I just thought that, since we're touching on a hot topic, let's just have a little fun, and, we'll start eating these Texas cheddar habanero popcorn bites, and they're honestly, they're pretty dead good.
And people thought we didn't talk about Texas. Here we go.
Right.
Here we go.
These are from Texas.
There you go. Thanks, Texas.
They're really good. They have a wonderful flavor. But if you don't have something to wash down the Scoville units in your esophagus, then they can grow on you, and it builds up pretty quick. So
I'll be honest with you, I'm not real worried about the Scoville units on the esophagus.
Yeah,
it's later on down the track that I'm worried about.
I just thought that we could start popping these jokers and see who can last longest without taking a swallow of water.
Yeah, so let's just get this in perspective here. We're gonna kill ourselves eating habanero infused popcorn bites while also trying to talk about EHD and CWD. What could go wrong, guys? It'll be a lot of fun. Anyways, we're gonna. I guess if you guys are ready, we can jump right in. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Hide those things.
No. I'm not hiding them. I'm
he's
opening them.
Oh gosh, here we go.
I can hear the bag crinkle.
Yeah,
it's like trying to open a Little Debbie in the woods. You can't hide it.
Look at that.
All right, guys.
Matt's going in.
You need me to start it off?
Well,
man,
you're used to
gosh,
it.
Let's just going for.
Hey, I'm going. I ain't worried about it.
We do have indoor plumbing here, so you guys have to be in.
I'm not worried about that.
Gosh, that's not bad.
This is.
Just give it a minute.
It's more tingly than hot.
It better grow in a hurry.
Get more.
I will. Man, that fake.
Wait a minute. What are you doing already?
What do you mean?
Water.
What? Okay. I'm going to die on air, guys.
Yep. Well, what you're going to die of is that fake powdery cheese.
Yep. Powdered cheddar.
I thought it was good.
Man, I remember eating the powdered cheese popcorn when I was a kid. That's why we all have ridiculous insides now, I'm sure. Eating that Funyuns and stuff like that.
One thing I didn't think about is having tissue because it's going to open my sinuses up.
I got a roll of not toilet paper, but paper towels here somewhere in the shop.
Go.
If you can find it, which everybody can see, it's a mess.
What do you think, Taylor?
Not bad. It's not as bad as I thought they were going to be.
No.
They're really not.
I thought I was going to be in some trouble because
I
don't mind spice, but like I said, I gravitate towards Cajun.
But look at this. At least we're sticking with the non-GMO,
right?
Or gluten-free non-GMO.
Oh yeah,
we can promote that.
And it's made in the USA.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, get another handful.
All right. So CWD
/ EHD, correct.
So what do you want to roll with first?
First question here that I've got, and I think this is just kind of, we need to sort of lay the foundation of this thing first. And I should have said this before. I know that if you guys have been following us from the beginning, you know kind of the academic background that Jeremy and Matt both have and their experience in wildlife and those sort of things. So this isn't just, a few guys giving some random opinion of a topic that,
It's not, but I do want to preface that we are not disease biologists. Mm-mm. We are not virologists or pathologists or anything else.
Kind of addictive.
They really are.
Matt's got a problem.
One of many.
We, while working for the state, obviously we were heavily involved in our CWD response plan and having to immerse ourselves in learning about CWD. But I'm still one of those that's pretty skeptical about what we really know.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I think there's probably as much as we don't know still as that we do, if not way more.
Sure.
And look, there's some really smart people in the Southeast that have devoted their lives and careers to studying diseases, and they're the people to go to get definitive answers. I mean, they are.
Mm-hmm.
But
we can just tell you what we know and what we think.
Yeah, that's it, and that's where we are. And it's I'm gonna stick more toward Alabama, the way I think about it here from how we're responding to it as a hunting population in Alabama, and how we
calling me in for another one.
How we are responding as a state. But so far, I don't think we've done a bad job at the state level with what the response plan was. I mean, a lot of the guys there, our Deer Project leader and some of the other higher ups went to several different states and said, hey, what worked?
Loser number one.
Yeah, what worked? What didn't work?
He's got sweat beads on his nose.
Already, I told y'all, it's not my thing.
He's got sweat on his nose.
By the way, and it's also about
Do you need a glass of milk?
It's also about what
50 degrees in here.
is it 50? I figured
It's probably about 50.
yeah, about 50 degrees in this shop, so there's no reason for me to be sweating other than this
Yeah,
Texas cheddar habanero balls.
We can't turn on the giant.
Your
heater.
nose is glistening.
Yes,
That's
Think
awesome.
for the camera.
I don't know where we were.
Well, I mean that
State response.
Yes.
But yeah, that's what we're getting at is that by no means is this the end all be all. We're just kind of having a discussion.
That's
and,
it.
And figuring
Because
out
we are not, disease professionals.
No.
We self-educated probably more than we did anything else on it, just to to be up on what's going on. And honestly, my opinion of the folks that's probably going to know the most about it as years go, because there's money involved, is going to be the deer breeders.
Yeah.
Because they have a vested interest in trying to figure this thing out.
Sure.
And not losing a bunch of deer, when CWD is found in their area, or, heaven forbid, in one of their pens and it have to be depopped.
Yep.
I need tissue.
My nose might be glistening, but his is dripping.
Yeah. I'll get you some in a minute.
I'll be good.
There's a big vested interest in trying to figure out how to test these deer prior to mortality.
Right. Sure.
That's coming along. It's not there yet.
Gotcha. So, I guess let's start foundationally because I said CWD/EHD because
Two totally different things.
yes, and so I would say if you can, and again, like this is just we're gonna tell you like, hey, this is what we know, and there's a whole lot that we may not know. But as far as foundationally, what's the difference between the two, or how does what's the main difference between two
CWD
diseases?
is chronic wasting disease. It's a TSE, and I struggle to say it's transmissible spongiform encephalopathy. I struggle with that last one. But, it's a chronic disease that takes quite a bit of time for the animal to succumb to. And in general, they succumb to something else other than CWD.
Okay.
Whether it be hit by a car, hunter harvest, some other illness because their body condition has gone down because they're not acting right. They're not functioning properly, eating properly, drinking properly, things like that. You do have a chronic form of EHD as well. We see it more here in the South than you do in the North. But then there's also an acute form of EHD, which it kills a lot of deer. Even in places in the South, depending on which version, what is it? We got version 6 here, don't we? Primarily.
There's
There's several,
16
but it's
to 18 different strains that
right. But we
can come through. And
yeah.
you just don't really know.
You don't.
It can vary from year to year.
It's kind of like the flu. There's different strains of the flu, and there's different strains of EHD. One of the things with EHD is if they survive it, they build antibodies, and then they can survive it, there forward. And they can pass that on to their offspring.
Gotcha. Okay.
But the main difference is the modes of transmission.
That's right.
So EHD is spread through a biting fly called a midge. We call them in the South no-see-ums.
Yeah.
So
right.
no-see-ums will,
Culicoides now.
yes, they will wear flesh out in bow season. If you're sitting in a tree,
It's awful.
it can be absolutely brutal.
They're the things that bite you, and you have no idea how they got through your clothes, but
Right.
they get through your clothes and bite you.
And they're tiny. They're really tiny.
Yeah.
But it's just a small biting fly, and that's what transmits the disease to deer. And they don't transmit it to other deer. Once a deer is infected from a fly, it either survives the acute form, develops the chronic form, or builds antibodies or is resistant.
Okay.
So that's the 3 responses.
So basically, I mean, general population is going to be familiar with that from COVID.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
you either
yeah.
get
That's
COVID
right.
and succumb from it, or you survive
That's
it,
right.
and either have long-term effects from it or you build antibodies. And so.
And because the way it's transmitted and it's worse in dry years, and the gnats hang around the water, it's a lot of different variables. But we have EHD every single year in the South.
Okay.
Now it may not be this big outbreak, but we get reports of EHD kills every year all across the Southeast.
So if you hear people talk about, we had a big die-off,
that's EHD.
Probably EHD.
Yeah.
And generally, if we have a big die-off in the South, it's from a variant, not a variant, but one of the strains that we don't have often. What was the last big one we had? We were both still employed at the state. It was
I remember
14, 15.
14 or 15. Yeah, it was right before the bad one in the Midwest.
Right.
I think it was 11 or 12 when they had a really bad outbreak.
They
in
had
the
a bad
Midwest.
one in 7, and then maybe 11, and then 14, I think, through the Midwest. I had to go back through my records, but that was when we were still hunting in Pike County, Illinois, back then. And it got so bad we gave up all our properties up there. It just was terrible. It's back now. It's back as good as it's ever been, but it's taken this long because they had 2 or 3 there that spread out and just didn't have older age class bucks.
Yep.
But like I said, we have it every year, so we're going to have deer, succumb to it. They're going to be turned in to SCWD and going to be tested, and we'll get reports out. But when they have an outbreak, what do you say, Middle Tennessee north, it hammers the deer.
Really?
I mean, it hammers them.
So now, like, and this may be a little too detail-oriented, I guess, but I have heard, just kind of hearsay type stuff, these, like you're saying in the Midwest, these bigger deer that have larger antlers and are in velvet, are they more or less likely to be infected? Because, like, I guess what I've heard is they got
All the
big,
blood flow.
Yeah, all the blood flow
Right.
in their head up there, and that gives these flies and these midges something to
Well,
snack on.
They
And-
typically have to, they have to have skin. So, around the eyes, the flesh around the nose, the lips. I would imagine that antlers would definitely be something that they could feed from.
I don't know of, and this is where you love those guys that keep their nose in the research. I don't know of any research that has pointed to older age class, larger bucks or antlers causing them to be more susceptible. I at that point, when they have a dry year and they have a outbreak in the Midwest, I think it's
Pretty much across all age classes.
Okay.
It just
Yeah.
is indiscriminate. Bucks, does, all of them, just wipes them out.
Gotcha. So it doesn't really matter. I gotcha. Yeah, and so that's kind of EHD, like you said, is probably more prevalent here in the South than CWD is.
Much more prevalent, and you'll have a lot of folks argue with EHD and CWD that EHD is a bigger impact to the deer herd. And truly it is. But now, long term, will that still be the case? 100 years from now, we don't know the answer to that.
Right.
CWD's only been around since the 60s that we're aware of.
And, we can't control what a biting fly does, but we can control what parts of a deer get moved around from infected areas into areas that are, not facing the effects of CWD. So, I've talked to quite a few folks that, when I work for the state agency, why are y'all not doing something about EHD? And I'm like, what do you want us to do?
Yeah.
What can we do?
On a landscape level, there's
Right.
not anything. Now, the deer breeders, folks that's got high numbers of deer in enclosures, they do employ some preventative measures. They've got misting systems.
But you can't do that across the landscape in wild
it's
deer.
impossible. So, and they're doing that, one, because it's a major investment because they've got a ton of deer that's worth quite a bit of money. But two, most of those deer are crossed with northern genetics.
Right. So they're highly
They're
susceptible to it
very
anyway.
susceptible.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they don't like when we have EHD roll through when it's bad.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, we have it every year, but if we have a year that's kind of tough,
Deer breeders take it on the nose,
they
man.
do.
It can be bad.
The year that I'm trying to remember when we were still with the state, the first report I had was from a deer breeder up in, I believe they were right outside Coleman area, and the lab called and said, "Hey, you might want to come check these deer." I'm like, "Okay, why?" And I said, "Well, we've had 36 deer brought in today."
Oh,
and I was like, "Oh boy." So I, went and ended up, knowing the guy, and they lost, I think, 80% of their deer.
See, like, I mean,
that's taking it on the nose, fellas.
Yeah, I mean, like, you guys probably don't know this, but my dad, he had an enclosure, and he had a deer farm, raised deers, raised bucks to sell to trophy enclosures and those sort of things. So he did that for a number of years, and you're talking about trying to take preventative measures for that kind of stuff. I don't know that it really helped anything or not, but we put kind of the mesh stuff up about 8 foot, 6 to 8 feet from the ground up, because supposedly no-see-ums don't, that was the kind of the rumor at that point in time, is that the no-see-ums don't like to fly up higher than that. They stay real low elevation. And so anything you could do just to create a barrier around your perimeter, you know what I mean? And again, I don't know
those
that
jokers
that
sure
anything.
eat me alive 20 feet.
Yeah, about 20 foot.
Yeah. So, you know what I mean? I can kind of see the concern for people who do have enclosures, and I mean, you've got a ton of money, and my dad's operation was not big by any stretch, but he had a lot of money invested in those deer, and you have something like that roll through and wipe out, like you said, 80% of them. I mean, that's grounds for closing up shop if you're not careful. So,
and that's probably another big difference when we're talking about it being transmissible. EHD, with it being a fly, and you get deer, whether they're confined in a fence or they're confined to a small watering hole or food source, where they're congregating, you could get 50+% of those deer end up with EHD. You don't tend to see that type of prevalence numbers in CWD. And now it's in enclosures, it can be really high because they don't have anywhere to go. But in the wild, even with feed, water, salt licks, things like that, man, 10%, 20%, somewhere between those two is kind of what everybody uses as a rule of thumb. Now, there are populations that they're seeing prevalence rates, what's mule deer in it, up into the mid-30s. But that's in the areas that it's been the longest.
But it still, even at those rates, it still hasn't caused the population crashes that were feared.
Right.
Gotcha.
That was the big fear.
And my concern with management from state agencies, because they all do it different. And, nobody's done one single thing that seemed to have helped much.
Right.
But CWD isn't going to be the end of whitetail deer. It's not going to be the end of whitetail hunting. But if hunters don't change their mindset and managers don't change their mindset and change how they manage those herds, then the additive mortality that we're placing on them can drive the population down. As hunters, we can drive the population down as additive mortality without any of the other factors.
Right.
If we're not doing things right. So that's long term, that's my concern.
Gotcha. And so, like, I know we kind of said that the spread, EHDs from a fly, from the midge kind of thing, but with CWD, do we know how it's spread? Is it just kind of popping up and we don't really have an answer for that? Or
there is a completely random type of
spontaneous
CWD.
And there's been a couple of well-known biologists that's kind of what they kind of hang their hat on, is we don't know, we can't do anything because there's these spontaneous pop-ups. And look, that is concerning.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't see it near as much as we see the transmitted version of CWD. And I hate to say version, but
Yeah.
the deer-to-deer contact,
Right.
the spread.
It can be highly infectious.
Yeah.
And as far as how it is transmitted, it can persist in the soil, in vegetation.
Yeah.
It's been transmitted through, or it's found in semen, other bodily fluids.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's different ways that it can be transmitted, but like Jeremy was stating earlier, we really don't know all the ways that it can be transmitted from one deer to another.
Mm-hmm.
I know there are places that have been completely depopulated of CWD positive deer, and the top layers of the soil have been removed and replaced,
sterilized,
and brought new deer in
and they contracted
that had not been exposed to CWD, and within a few months, years, they're starting to show positives.
Wow.
So,
and there's, I don't know how much is released to the public on some of the new spots that pop up. I would expect the deal down in Texas is public knowledge. I think it is. But, I mean,
Southeast Mississippi's a new one.
Yeah. But, I mean, they're popping up nowhere near, anywhere else.
Right.
And there's not a good explanation. In Texas, there's been a positive inside a biosecure facility.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one that is tightly controlled.
Yeah.
And, hey, all of a sudden here's CWD in here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they got no clue how.
And see, my question is, can the spontaneous CWD, can it be transmitted in the same way that
at the same rates?
At the same rates that the other, or is it just spontaneous to that individual?
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are some of the questions that we don't have answers for.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think it's also important that people understand EHD is a virus.
Mm-hmm.
Chronic wasting disease is a protein that is misshapen.
And that's why it's found in the brain, I guess, when it's
It is a protein in the body that can persist outside the body for a number of years, and it's a mutated protein.
And it replicates that way.
Right.
So it over time it just
it
degrades.
infects other proteins.
Yep. Gotcha. Yeah, that's getting off into some sure enough sketchy stuff there.
Well, and that's for the folks smarter than we are.
Yeah.
But the big concern initially, there was two big ones when all this really ramped up in the South when we started seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
One, all the deer are going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Two, people are going to get it.
And that's still my biggest concern.
And see, that's an answer we don't know.
Oh, so you're saying like humans?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yes.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if you look at all TSEs, I mean, there's TSEs in several species. There's TSEs in humans.
Mm-hmm. CJD.
Yeah. And I'll try to say it. Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease, maybe.
Creutzfeldt-Jakob.
Yeah, I've heard it pronounced several different ways.
Yep.
But it's a TSE, and if you'll remember back when we had the mad cow disease fiasco several years ago, at first everybody was saying, people can't get it, the meat's safe to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And they repeated that for years until several hundred people in Europe
Had it.
and they got it. Where'd they get it? They got it from cattle.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not going to sit here on this podcast and publicly state that I think people can get chronic wasting disease.
Or
but
not
there's
get it.
enough doubt. Right. There's enough doubt in my mind that I'm going to test my deer.
Yep.
And I'm not going to feed a deer to my family that tests positive. That's just me.
Right.
That's my opinion, because I'm not going to risk that with my family.
Sure.
And I talked to a couple of folks. I was, I guess, fortunate enough to get to listen in on the Texas, symposium on CWD that they had. By the way, there's people out there that can do anything. It's unbelievable how smart people are. But anyway,
He's not one of them.
I love how he looked at me. I love how he looked at me.
At least
when
he
said that.
recognizes it.
Yeah.
He looked at me like, I just want you to know. These people smart.
They some smart folks out there. But one of the keynote speakers, she was asked a question, about eating, meat, and she said, "Am I scared to eat the meat?" And she answered it and kind of quantified it, yes and no. She said, "I had much rather eat infected meat that we knew was just a glowing red, wildly infected animal one time, as to eat some over the course of my life."
Yeah,
and not know.
Yep, not know, because she was referring back to the prawn loading in your body. Because once it's there, you don't really get rid of this stuff.
right.
Just the slow buildup and loading into your body.
Yeah.
She said that scared her more for humans than eating it once or twice in your life and it being just a wildly infected animal.
Yeah, it's like like carcinogenic type stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the same
Just
deal.
build
Is
up.
that your body can't break this down, and it just kind of gets stored, and and continues to build and continues to build until one day it causes a problem.
And that that kind of formed how I think about it. I'm not going to knowingly eat one
Right.
that tests positive. I'm not going to overly worry if I go eat a deer or elk or something that I don't know if it was tested or not out west. But I'm not going to do that every day.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to be, if I was out there and living out there and eating it all the time, I'd be like, okay, I kind of want to know if this has been tested or not.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yes. Yeah.
Sure.
So,
Well, like that kind of brings us to this next question here. It's a good segue. What do landowners or long-term leaseholders, like, what do these people need to know, like, about, in your opinions, what do people need to be concerned with, and what stuff is just fear-mongering and kind of needs to, you know what I'm saying?
Neither is doom and gloom.
nope. The sky's not falling.
No. So, in the South, if you're a landowner, land manager, you will occasionally have outbreaks of EHD.
Nothing you can do.
There's nothing you can do about that. You may lose between 5 and 15, 20%. I haven't seen an Alabama deer herd lose more than 15 to 20% in my lifetime. Not native Alabama deer.
No, yeah, not native.
Not native Alabama deer.
The deer restocked from other areas or deer genetically,
right. Different story.
they will lose more.
Yeah. And I've often suspected that one reason the bankhead population hasn't been able to grow exponentially like other southern populations has a lot to do with their lack of resistance to southern strains of EHD.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have nothing to prove that.
I know.
I'm
just anecdotal data.
Right. It's just a possibility.
Yeah.
And I would really like to see somebody look into the antibodies in that deer herd. I mean, because we know they're genetically different. I mean, that's been done. I would be very curious if there was if they could pinpoint those antibodies and determine whether or not that herd is growing to where it's they're not going to be immune, but more resistant
Sure.
to
Right.
it.
So with EHD in the South, if you do experience an outbreak that you feel like is substantial, one, report it to your state agency because they can come pull samples, send those samples to SQUIDIS, and they can at least isolate the serotype and figure out what strain it was.
And that's important to know.
Well,
right.
That's great for us to be able to track, and a lot of folks won't turn them in.
That's what I was going to ask. Is
Right.
like, are people afraid to do that? To go,
Oh,
my
yeah.
gosh,
Yeah.
man,
It's
if
not
we
calling the
report that-
government about anything.
Yeah, they
Right,
don't.
sure.
Yeah, the famous Ronald Reagan line. I'm from the government. We're
I'm here to help.
No, not in Alabama. But I have always encouraged folks to, if you see something abnormal with wildlife, look, we have a vested interest, and I say we, I'm no longer with the state, but the state has a vested interest in trying to maintain healthy populations. They may not be perfect at it, but they're not trying to turn a blind eye, and they're not trying to hide anything. They got nothing to gain from it. But we do have everything in the world to gain from more knowledge of what's going on.
Gotcha.
And as far as, could it affect your deer harvest in a year or two? Yeah, it could. You may need to back off a deer harvest if if you have a high loss. But thankfully, most areas in the South, those populations are going to recover pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That's just because of the sheer number of deer we
Right.
have.
That's right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so now that's with EHD. What do people need to know about CWD? I mean, is that do people,
That-
you know,
I guess totally different.
I know, and that's what I'm saying is like there is a whole lot of really scary, really like you said, doom and gloom scenario, like even stuff written out there,
Yep.
you know, by otherwise credible publications to make people go, oh my gosh, what, you know what I mean? If even if one popped up here, I ain't telling nobody about it.
Yeah.
Because I don't want people coming in here and killing every deer.
Well, and that's
you know
the
what I
thing.
mean?
There's a lot of misinformation out there
Yeah.
about what the state would do and how their response would be. And if you'll look up in northwest Alabama right now in Lauderdale County, they're not going in shooting all the deer. They're encouraging people to bring more samples. We say so in a particular area, if it is detected, the next step is to figure out what the prevalence rate is. Okay, great, we found one sample. Is it in 3% of the population? Is it in 10% of the population? Well, we don't know until we sample. So they try to encourage people, hey, voluntarily bring your deer in so that we can sample more deer.
Instead of them coming in and killing your deer.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And even if they do go in and kill deer,
It's
they're
not
going to
gonna
do
be
it on
high numbers.
It's not going to be in high numbers, and they're not going to do it on areas that they don't have permission to be. Okay, so like if I'm a landowner and I say, hey, I've got 600 acres over here, y'all can come kill 8 or 10 does off my place and test them. You know, they're not going to do that without permission.
Yeah, Alabama is heavy to the property rights side of things, and
Amen.
Yeah.
The only instance that you're going to see a fight over getting on a place and killing deer is if it's found in an enclosure. They're going to want to know.
That's going to be a
they're
battle.
going to want to know why it's there.
Where you got your deer.
Yeah, they're gonna backtrace your deer. They're gonna be in every orifice of your body, but they should be. I mean, because there's plenty of great deer breeders out there, high fences out there that follow the letter of the law, and there's plenty that's not.
Right.
I mean, we were a party to a couple that weren't back in the day, and that's a lot of work. But you know, folks that bring in deer illegally hurt everybody.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, like I just go back to thinking about Dad. You know, I mean, Dad did everything he could possibly do, you know, to make sure that everything was by the book. And if something like that had happened to him, I mean, he's not an operation where he's got, you know, a separate pen for breeders and a set, you know what I mean? Everything that he owns is, you know, essentially
there.
in his 15 acres of land that he's got. So, you know, you could come through there and wipe everything he has out. You know what I mean? If something pops up and then what? Is there any kind of like reimbursement for that? Probably not, you know?
Well, there's been some court cases in other states that landowners have been reimbursed. That's not, I don't think that's common in every state. That's going to depend on how your judge views property rights and the ownership of wildlife.
Right.
Here in Alabama, the public owns wildlife.
Yep.
Deer can't be
All wildlife,
Yeah.
even if it's in an enclosure.
Yeah, deer can't be owned by a individual. As far as a wild whitetail. Sorry, getting all kind of text on my computer. But that's going to come. Look, there's high fences. There's breeders up in the northwest corner part of the state. CWD's in the northwest corner. It's coming.
Yep.
And it's going to be a battle, and it'll play out on the news and in all the publications, and it'll be ugly, and the state will be the bad guy. I mean, that's just the way it's going to happen. There's no other way for it to happen. But being involved in the writing of the plan, Alabama's is pretty good.
I think they have a pretty solid response.
They do. Now there's teams that will be used to shoot deer, but like Matt said, it's going to be on a permission basis. If hunters would work with, and this is tough because the state does some really outlandish things from time to time, but if the landowners where all this is taking place will work with the state and not be so defensive that the state's going to do something wrong, it'll be a much smoother process.
And it's really not that big of a deal. There was a lot of misconceptions because there were some people that when you explain to them, this is where they got all caught up. If you say, well, you know, we're gonna do what it takes to be 95% sure that if it's prevalent in whatever percentage of the population that we detect it.
Mm-hmm.
When you say 95%, all they ran with was they're going to kill 95% of the deer.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's not even what was said. That's not what's written in the plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what was said by any employee. They heard 95%.
And a radius. You know,
Right, within a given radius.
Right.
If it's 10, if the prevalence rate is say 10%, we need to kill X amount of deer to be 95% sure that we detected it.
Mm-hmm.
When they hear 95%, oh my gosh, they're killing 95% of our deer. No, that's not what anybody said. Nobody said that.
Not to mention, not possible.
It's not possible.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Not in a radius like that.
No,
Not
there's
possible.
no way to do that.
Yeah.
And look, the research has shown depop in places is not super effective.
It spreads slower in lower populated areas, but you're not going to stop it by depopulating a deer herd.
And like, does that have any influence in, like, baiting laws and
Absolutely.
things like
Yeah,
that? You know what I mean?
absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have probably seen where Uncle Ted has been going to war with Michigan and stuff over this type stuff.
In the target zones or whatever, Alabama calls it or any state calls it, they are going.
Spots.
Yeah, they're going to do away with baiting.
Okay.
They're going to stop it, and rightfully so. Honestly, I wish we'd quit baiting. Period.
I know it.
I hate it, but now it's a necessary evil. You feel like if you don't do it, your neighbor is, and
My gripe is that you have to pay to it. To have. I mean, it's ridiculous to have a
it's
law on the books that states it is unlawful in the state of Alabama to use bait.
now you're just getting.
Unless you give me
Now
15
you're
I'm
just-
sorry, I'm
now
going
you're just
there.
pointing the finger.
I'm going there. I'm going there. It's illegal to bait in the state of Alabama. But wait a second, if you pay us $15, then it'll be okay. No, it's not okay. And I'm still waiting on somebody to carry that to court.
That's the first instance that I found where Alabama wildlife regulation and law became about money.
Is there any other state in the United States that makes you buy a baiting privilege?
Oh, it's ridiculous.
I don't have any idea.
I'm not aware of one. There may very well be, but
No, it's either you can or you can't.
Yeah.
right. And
Not.
and that's the way I think it should be. Either do away with it and go back to what the law states, or change the law, but don't
Agreed.
make residents pay for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, is it like I don't want to get off too much in the weeds, but I mean, is that just an economic thing? Like, hey, we could
No question.
No,
spend a bunch of time writing tickets,
It
or
was
we
about
could just
bringing in more revenue.
Sure.
Because look, the way that the more licenses they sell, the more revenue they get from the Pittman-Robertson Act. So it was just about generating more income.
Yeah, like, do we want to spend more resources on sending wardens out to write tickets, or do we want to just charge people $15 a pop and let that be the end of it?
Right, and see, and it's so ridiculous because you can still get a ticket for hunting over bait if it's not farther than 100 yards and out of your line of sight. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, if you
I'm
don't
sorry.
have the permit.
It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
I agree,
Um,
no doubt.
Sorry.
no, you're good.
No, and that's like, I guess, and this is kind of the last thing we can kind of wrap up with here, or the last question I've got, unless you want to add something to it. But given what we know now, which may or may not be very much, but given what we know now, what are your projections for like long-term effects for deer herds if this is left unchecked, left unmanaged?
CWD?
Both CWD, EHD.
and
I know EHD. There's not much you can do.
Yeah, I'm
You're
not
saying-
worried about EHD.
No.
Not worried
But-
about it.
And this may sound stupid. In my lifetime, I don't think CWD is going to be a problem. In my lifetime. I think it's going to be a generation or two down the line that if we don't manage properly for the additive mortality rates, that we could see a problem.
Right, I believe
But
that.
there's so much just changing. I mean,
Yes, by the minute.
Hey, Jesus may come back tomorrow, and I hope he does, because this place is a wreck.
Yeah,
Um,
come on.
but the the state of game management in the next 50 years, I mean, who knows? I fully expect the North American model to be gone by then.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in time, it's going to be controlled by a handful of people, likely the government, and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and I don't know if people know this, so I'm just going to go ahead and tell y'all how the North American model works, because I think it's important for voting age people to understand this. Wildlife is held in a public trust. Well, what is a trust? You have the trustees who are given authority to manage a resource, and you have the beneficiaries who receive the benefit of the resource. We are all the beneficiaries. So we get to partake in wildlife, harvest wildlife, but we have to do it within the bounds that the trustees establish. Mm-hmm. So because we all own the wildlife, we should all have a vested interest in assisting that government agency with their data collection. That's why I get so upset when people tell me, I'm not game checking my deer. The government, well, don't be upset when the government makes a stupid decision because you're not giving them data.
Right.
It's just that simple. Help them get the data they need to make the right decisions, because if I'm working with a landowner with, deer harvest recommendations, if they're not giving me all the information I need, I'm going to make very poorly executed decisions on how to manage their resource.
Sure.
Well, it's the same thing with the state. Imagine having to do that over however many square miles the state of Alabama is.
Yeah. Which, and I, first off, totally agree with what you're saying. I think not a pushback, but I think the reasoning and people saying some of that stuff is for me to say, like, hey, I want you to come out to my property and I want you to tell me what I should do to enhance my habitat or, whatever. Well, like, that's a personal, like, I know you. You know what I mean? So I can trust you. I don't know that people are trusting the government too much.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't know that
right.
people are, and that's kind of like.
No, and I get it.
That,
you know what I
that is
mean?
the problem.
Yeah.
Is the government has gone so far past its intent that the good things that they do are lost.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly why he and I are sitting right here today and not still sitting at a desk or in a green truck for the state of Alabama. Is we were not trusted to do what we were employed to do, primarily by the public because of who we worked for. Mm-hmm. We come out and work for ourselves and get paid way more than we got paid at the state. We're still the same person. We're still giving the same information.
Yeah.
We're just not associated with state government. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
They had
guilty by association. I mean,
yes.
You know what I mean?
And I'm not blowing our horn, but we are good at what we do. Some of them are not.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing about the difference between me and Jeremy, we take what we do seriously, and like my name and reputation is important to me.
Sure.
So I don't want to give people crappy information. Mm-hmm. There are employees, and it's not just in the state government. There's employees everywhere that don't give a flip. They're drawing a paycheck, and they're doing the bare minimum to get by, and you will get that in some state employees as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And there's a big difference. And I think that when someone has a negative experience with an employee like that, then they look at every state employee that way.
Yeah. And I'm just going to try to throw a bone to state agencies. Part of it is there just really aren't good up-and-coming biologists anymore that are hunters, land managers, things of that nature.
There's not.
Everybody that goes into our type business, our industry, are worried about the snail darters and the butterflies and the bats. Look, that's very important. I love them too. I go do a lot of different things that's got to do with T&E species with what we do. But there's a complete void now of people that understand how to manage habitat.
Right.
How to get on a tractor and drive a tractor.
Yeah, the graduates coming out of 4-year degree programs right now cannot go to a landowner and relate to that landowner who has spent, a lot of his resources and time, perhaps millions of dollars, acquiring property, and now he's like, well, what can I do with it? What do I need to do with it? A lot of the landowners know more about what they want to do than the graduates because they're not experienced, and a lot of them don't even grow up hunting. Which blows my mind. I don't know why you would want to go into a wildlife field and be a wildlife biologist for a state agency and you don't hunt.
Right. Yeah.
I don't see how you can do that and be effective at
Yeah,
it.
there's got to be some form of relatability.
Exactly.
Exactly. Got to meet them where they are to some degree.
What are you doing?
I'm being funny. I'm texting.
I don't like this.
No, that was a picture of me. I'm texting.
It was a selfie.
Yes, it was.
You took a selfie while filming the podcast.
That was
What an idiot.
That was Howard with the Management Advantage, and we're talking about something that's going on Facebook, and he kind of made a comment that I bet that guy got on an Orvis vest.
You got it.
So I took a picture and sent it to him. He'll like that. But yeah, the industry, the future of our industry is. I hate to use the word in peril, but it really is.
It is
because there are not people that are interested in game management, the North American model especially. It's just becoming a pastime.
I mean,
that scares the devil out of me for future generations.
Yeah, if you look at some of the administrators, and I'm in all state level governments, and particularly the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Park Service and the Forest Service, all these entities who have lots of acreage, millions upon millions of acres. The administrators are not managing it for the benefit of hunters, and that's what they should be doing. That's what they should be doing.
Yeah.
And they're not hunters.
No, and the hunters pay the bill.
Yeah.
They pay the bill.
That's why you buy a hunting license.
Yep.
That's why you're taxed on firearms and ammunition and tree stands and camo. That is an excise tax of the Pittman-Robertson Act that goes right back into conservation. So, when if any,
I bet 85% of hunters, maybe 90%, have no idea.
No, they don't know
what the PR funds or how the North American model works. I wish I could think of the guy's name. Who's the guy that does the video on the North American model? I can't think of his name, but it's an unbelievable video.
I don't know.
Look, I'll find it, and we're going to post it.
Yeah, we'll get it in the link to description of this video or something like that.
People need to know.
Gotcha.
But CWD, circling back to that, I don't know that there's – look, like I said, I'm not worried about it in my lifetime. It's going to change how we manage deer and how we hunt some. But that's about all it's going to do.
Right. My biggest concern is the potential for human health implications.
Yeah.
And other than that, I think we can adjust statewide regulations and hunter harvest for whatever changes may be coming. I'm not worried about that aspect. I'm more concerned. I'm not worried about any of it. I'm just more concerned that, when are they going to make that first link between an infected deer and an infection in humans?
Yeah. And now we kind of sailed over the fact that it has been documented that it can pass into other primates. But
under controlled conditions.
Yes, and fed directly to them, and they is glowing red animal. We're going to feed that glowing red protein to this. To me, it looks like the research project kind of said, we're going to feed it to them until they got it.
Yeah.
So that we can see that they got it. It's kind of how it looked. But, hey, they got it. So that's not promising.
Right.
No,
it's not. Well, I guess if there's nothing else, we can all go cry ourselves to sleep now. I guess, or whatever. But
eat some more cheddar popcorn.
Yeah, eat some more cheddar popcorn.
Absolutely.
Hey, did I win, by the way?
I think so.
I mean, I drank water, but yeah, I guess you did.
Yeah.
I still need tissue.
I'm not sweating anymore. I feel like I will.
We'll,
I looked over there, and the pores in his nose were just beading up with sweat. I was like, golly.
Yep, that's right.
Hey, next show, I got a fresh gallon of milk. You ready?
Oh heck yeah! If I can down what's left in there, if I had a little half Half cup of milk. What?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
no. I'm not doing that.
You're not doing that?
I'm not doing
Okay.
that. I got to drive all the way back home.
Okay.
Halfway across the state.
For another
No.
show then.
Yeah.
That's right.
It may not be for another show. I don't know that I'm up for that.
Yeah, it's rough.
I've
man.
done it once.
Yeah, well, guys, thank you so much for listening in, and we appreciate all the support. Stay tuned for the next episode because we're going to announce something that we are doing through Instagram with another one of our partners. One of our sponsors is going to be helping us out doing something pretty special, and I think you guys would be very interested in hearing a little bit more about what that is. So
Absolutely.
stay tuned. Like I said, we certainly appreciate it. And if you haven't already, check us out on YouTube. Matt has been killing stuff left and right, and we're trying to.
The rest of us are
Yeah,
working.
The rest of us are working. That's
Well,
right. I
no,
can't.
let me just tell the truth. So,
Wait a minute.
wait a minute. No, you wait a minute. I start getting all these texts about, when are we going to film? When are we going to film? And I'm like, I don't know what y'all are doing. I'm filming. I'm getting video content right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what y'all are doing, but
Trying to.
I'm killing crap.
We can't hunt off of our porch.
That's true.
I didn't video that hunt, and that wasn't a hunt to begin with.
Well, my last hunting trip, I know we're closing out here, but my last hunting trip, I took a week. I'm like, I'm going to hunt for a week. Told my wife, hey, I've got the time. I'm going to go hunt for Christmas. Okay, cool. I hunted twice. And then that joker drags me off doing site prep burns.
We
for
had to
3
get work
days.
done. But here's the deal.
I wouldn't have killed anything
I
anyway.
honestly felt bad about asking him to come help me do that. But one, we had to get it done. And two, his target deer
Gone.
were not on camera the entire week. So it wouldn't have mattered either way.
Nah. He still's not there.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to him.
We're
but
bumping nearly 3 weeks now. So he's
he's
gone.
dead.
He's
He
probably
may
dead.
be dead this time.
He's gone.
I'm sorry, Jeremy.
We got a couple more that
Wavy?
showed up. Wavy's gone.
Well, MIA.
Likely. Yeah.
MIA.
He's been MIA before.
He has been MIA, but generally this time of year, he's cruising through every 48 hours.
Okay.
And done that for a long time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they're getting right. We've had over the last 5 to 7 days, it's shifting. There's a lot of cruising and pushing around taking place.
Oh, I bet in the last 2 weeks, I've had a dozen different bucks, new bucks that I've
New
never
bucks.
seen before,
Really?
show up. Now they're not there long.
Yeah.
You know, if you happen to be there, you get lucky. A lot of them are at night, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go spend some time next week in the woods.
And I've got some really good footage over the last week.
Yeah,
I mean, just awesome.
Well, that's what I was
footage.
getting at is they're burying me in videos to edit, so I got to try to play catch up. If you haven't seen it already, go check out. I think Matt's got a doe kill up on the YouTube channel and has also got the 138-inch buck, which is a phenomenal accomplishment for anywhere, but certainly for Alabama. So that was pretty sweet one, too.
I'm gonna go shoot a spike with an AR-15 and make the world blow up.
That's right.
Do that. Do that. Use a 30-round magazine, too.
Yeah, post it on the View channel.
Maybe
Show how
we'll-
it just destroys the deer.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Thanks so much. We'll see you for episode number 8. Thanks.